On August 11th, 2017, nearly 400 hate groups from around the nation gathered in Charlottesville, Virginia, to march in what would be considered the largest hate rally in the history of the United States. The Unite the Right rally, led by white supremacist organization leaders Jason Kessler and Richard Spencer, consisted of alt-right groups representing neo-Nazis, anti-LGBTQ groups, anti-feminist groups, anti-Islam groups, anti-black groups, and more white supremacy organizations marching throughout the state's capital promoting messages of white supremacy and terror. The march began as a response to decisions that were made to remove a statue of the Confederate leader Robert E. Lee in Emancipation Park. Before this decision had been made, there had already been a history of debate over retributing the park, which had previously served as a monument that honored the Confederacy. Prior to the decision to remove the statue, decisions had been made to rename the park from Lee Park to Emancipation Park in order to further distance the area from its Confederate roots. Alt-right groups had viewed these decisions as an attack on whiteness and white culture in the name of political correctness. As an act of resistance against the Unite the Right movement, counter-protesters gathered in Charlottesville. These groups marched in opposition to the movement, promoting messages of strength to stand against white supremacy. Unfortunately, the physical encounter between these two sides resulted in intense violence. Most notably was the death of 32-year-old leftist counter-protester Heather Heyer, who was killed after James Fields drove a car into a group of counter-protesters. This incident resulted in not only Heyer's death, but also 19 injuries. Heyer has been regarded as a martyr of the movement. James Fields was later arrested for 30 charges, including a hate crime for Heyer's death. The articles we examined about the Unite the Right rally came from the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune. In the wake of the tragic events that occurred in Charlottesville as a result of the riots, we found that both media outlets published articles that sought to find someone to blame for the violence. Attributions of responsibility were the most prominent frames found within both sources. In America's confused aftermath, blame for the violence was posited on many people and groups, including white supremacy groups that congregated in Charlottesville, counter-protesters and Antifa members that fought against these white supremacy groups, and specific individuals involved with the riots, such as James Fields.
And I have a message to all the white supremacists and the Nazis who came into Charlottesville today. Our message is plain and simple. Go home. You are not wanted in this great Commonwealth. Shame on you.
Additionally, politicians were also blamed. These groups were blamed due to either the way that they acted during the Charlottesville riots or to the way that they responded to these riots. An overwhelming majority of the blame for the riots has been placed on Donald Trump for his inability to sufficiently condemn white supremacy. Articles in these media outlets involved opinion pieces and statements from other politicians condemning Trump for his seemingly immoral reactions. In Trump's tweets about the riots, Trump tweeted the following things: "Racism is evil," "What about violence on both sides?" and more tweets that made it unclear whom he thought was responsible.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides. It's been going on for a long time in our country.
Articles were focused on these reactions in addition to blaming Trump for the overall social climate that he has established in the United States in the past that may have had an influence on this white supremacist gathering. Both the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune use clear examples of priming in order to establish this issue as a moral dilemma at the fault of the alt-right and those who support the alt-right. Both news sources use negative language to condemn alt-right members as well as their supporters. Additionally, they align them with infamous tragedies such as Kristallnacht. Through the use of this language in these associations, these news sources are asking for their subscribers to regard how intense of a tragedy these riots are. Through placing an emphasis on Trump, they create a direct relationship between the socio-political climate that Trump has created in the United States and the riots that occurred.